Hello, how are you? Thanks for choosing this video. There's lots more to come on the channel, so please stick around. Hello and welcome. My name is Richard Simon. I am a cloud therapist. This is the March 2024 episode of Cloud State of Play. The dynamic Paul Bevan is back for another month. Paul is the research director for infrastructure at Bloor Research. They're a really nice bunch, those guys at Bloor Research. So do check them out if you get a chance to have a look at the video links that I've got in the description. Okay, so well, let's say hello to Paul. Paul, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. I love the idea of being dynamic, and we're not a bad bunch of blokes. So yeah, and we have a woman as well. So
well, I thought I thought I'll do a little extra plug for you guys. So
and we have a security analyst, and she's very good, but it's a she. So yes,
fantastic. Okay, cool. Well, that's all adding to the mix, which is great. So we are back for another 3 topics, and our topics for this month are first one is it the end of virtualization? So we'll cover a little bit more about the details on that. I know we've done a little bit of it on the February, I think, episode, but we will explain the difference between what we're talking about in the February edition and this particular one. So that's the first one. Is it the end of virtualization? The second one is a Tech Trends 2024 report by Deloitte. So we'll be looking at some of the content on that and kind of giving our view of the topics. And then the third one is the server vendors and AI dichotomy. So I think that's going to be quite interesting, and we'll probably see maybe Paul and I lock horns on that one. So we'll see how we get on.
if not before,
if not prior to that, you know, if not throughout the whole episode. It's going to be quite a controversial episode. Okay, so Paul, let's go on to the first of our topics. Now, what we wanted to do in this particular one, like I said, we covered the sort of the VMware aspect of it, I think, in the February episode of Cloud State of Play. So what we really want to focus on now is actually virtualization itself in general. Obviously, you know, VMware has a big part to play in that, but we're not kind of declaring it dead. We're actually asking for this kind of coming to an end in terms of the its popularity and its usefulness, really, in sort of today's dynamic cloud world and so on. So yeah, so unlike last month's episode, we're kind of focusing a little bit more on its sort of decline, especially with the recent sort of advance of things like cloud computing, last sort of 10-15 years, and also some of the more recent events that happened with Broadcom's acquisition of VMware. Do look for the Feb episode of Cloud State of Play for more details on that specifically. But this one's kind of more, I suppose, kind of virtual machines versus containers, maybe kind of discussion. That's kind of the area that I wanted to sort of explore a little bit more. So we've kind of got some links on that and various other things which I've kind of been digging up. But I kind of wanted to start really with some inefficiencies that we've seen in virtual machines, and especially because of the sort of the contrast with with container technology. So everything from sort of their cost, so the cost per virtual machine, to the amount of resources that they that they require, the compute power that's really sort of needed, the actual power in terms of energy and so on, performance. So things like the speed, boot up times, when you kind of restart virtual machines and so on. And also how you actually provision virtual machines and how you then subsequently kind of, manage and maintain them. Well, what's your sort of take on that? I've not kind of really had that discussion with you maybe for for a while.
Well, I think to sort of go to the start of the question, there is no doubt that in today's modern IT environment, containers are on the rise and VMs are on the decline. I mean, you only have to look at statistics for the growth of containers and the reduction in the number of VMs out there to say, yeah, there's a very definite trend there. And we can have a different debate around how long will VMs last for. Well, mainframes are still with us, so and they've been on the way out for decades. So I think it's not a case of it being dead, but clearly use of VMs is declining. But what I wanted to do, and I sort of thought about this, is actually you look at it almost in terms of not quite use cases, but where are containers good for and where are VMs good for? And so I took two extreme positions, and then we can sort of work our way to the middle in between. So taking the sort of the if you like, the sweet spot for containers, for a hyperscaler, who's delivering microservices based apps or services to millions of users and on a pay-per-use basis.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no contest. Containers are it. That's it. VMs simply couldn't handle that environment. Consequently, if you go to the other extreme and you look at an enterprise IT in its environment, in a traditional data center, running monolithic applications as opposed to microservices, VMs sort of made a level of sense, and probably still makes sense today. And so the question becomes, a question of microservices versus monolithic apps. At what point, is it ever going to be all microservices? And maybe when we get into some of the other debates around AI and where that's going, and some of the other sort of trends in technology, that says there will always be a case for monolithic type applications as opposed to microservices, simply because of complexity, stroke latency issues, all those sort of things maybe comes in. And yet others may say, well, no, I think latency, we can get over latency. So from my perspective, yes, it's on the way out over a long period of time, but it'll be around for a long period of time.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess kind of maybe I should do this at the end, but kind of just philosophically looking at it, the question I had, kind of what I thought recently, was kind of, has it really outlived its usefulness? And I do appreciate, as you said, we're not going to kind of, just like mainframes, we're not necessarily going to get rid of everything, but we all know that we can kind of get stuck on technology sometimes, especially organizations as well. You kind of, it's not easy to move off of that. There's kind of familiarity. You're kind of it's established. You've invested a lot in it in terms of skills and experience and resources, hardware, things like that. So it's kind of almost becomes an addiction, really.
Yeah, love-hate is probably the nearer, I think, in the sense that it's got a lot of, virtualization and VMs had a lot of benefits potentially when, it came along in the 90s. The reality was, of course, that human inefficiency meant that VMs really didn't deliver the sort of benefits that people were expecting in terms of server utilization. Everybody used to scream about the fact that pre-VMs, server utilization was somewhere less than 10%.
Yeah.
And what you found was that VMs didn't really make that a lot better, on the grounds that, you had a whole load of unmanaged VMs, and the reality was that servers were still underutilized.
Yeah, I think it started. I think that movement, it was the server consolidation wars, kind of in the late 90s and early 2000s, really, when I suppose VMware really sort of came on the scene with ESX at the time, and there was that kind of optimism, I think, to kind of dive into, the server consolidation sort of, scene, and everybody was kind of doing server consolidation and virtualizing and so on. So to a degree, I guess it did help with that. But you're right in terms of, I just felt that the whole ecosystem wasn't really there to take advantage of both, that optimization aspect of it, but also the, how do we make provisioning and management of virtual machines easier? I mean, I worked at IBM at the time, and I was right at the forefront of that with systems management tools, monitoring tools, and we were scrambling to make, our monitoring tools compatible with, VMware and, vCenter and all that kind of thing, so we could actually get a view of this virtualized world, which we were not privy to. We had agents that were running fit on physical machines, as you did, at the time, of all shapes and sizes. But we had no clue what was going on if the server was virtualized. So, I think those were kind of the drawbacks practically that I started seeing. Yes, it's great for virtualization. Yes, please do, feel free to do that, and that will help you. But I didn't see a huge amount around the kind of, building an ecosystem. I think that whole vRealize and whatever ecosystem that, and the SDDC, software-defined data center, that, the likes of VMware came up with was, decades later, which was really unfortunate. They didn't really kind of, bring it online, as quickly as they were kind of, selling the virtualization platform, the hypervisors themselves.
And maybe the issue there is not so much with the technology itself, but with the sort of culture and of the vendors at the time. Ecosystems is quite a relatively new, let's say in the last 10 or 15 years, concept in terms of pulling together an open ecosystem. And you have to say that even you talked about having agents, and trying to see what was going on inside the VMs. Similar challenges do exist with, understanding what's going on inside a hyperscaler's environment and all the container management there, and yes, the ecosystem has made it easier, but there's still agents running in there to help people see what the heck's going on inside, a public cloud environment. So, plus ça change, but I think that, one indisputable fact is that, containers make better use of the underlying bare metal than VMs ever did. I don't think there's any, just looking at it, and I'm not technical particularly, but I can see, the fact you had to have, you file up full versions of the OS every time, as a sort of guest OS, when new VMs came along, whereas, with containers, you're basically doing away with that layer completely. So from a point of view of effective use of the underlying technology, then containers certainly look on the surface of it much more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've looked at that in the past. I've also done a couple of talks on it separately as well, so I'll try and include those in the links for those in the description of the video. But I did ask Copilot. I couldn't help myself. I did ask Copilot for some information to help me out with some of the stats around it. And while I wasn't kind of really able to pinpoint specific, sort of stark contrasting, sort of numbers between, virtual machines and containers and so on, it did give some statistics around sort of from 2022, 2023, where, containers sort of in public clouds, I think I said that one of them found a particular survey that was run, found that 45% of the respondents stated that their containers are actually running in the public cloud. Another one from Datadog, which was interesting, was talking around sort of serverless and container adoption, as well as said that was on the rise, with 46% of container organizations now running serverless, in their sort of environments. And then again, I found one interesting report, which is quite old. It's 2019. It's from Gartner, but actually I have to give them credit because they actually kind of got it right. It said Gartner expects up to 15% of enterprise applications will be running in container environments by 2024. So that's not a bad guess, with up from 5%, I think, from the year before or something like that. But it said the thing that's going to hamper that, which I do, this is the point I really agree with on that 2019 report, is that it said it's the thing that's hampering that is the backlog of applications or technical debt and applications which require refactoring, basically, or require replacing. And I do agree with that. I think that's the point that has got the whole sort of container thing, stuck a little bit. It's the refactoring aspect. And we're seeing that reflected in other areas where things like DevOps, for example, is kind of, splintering into things like platform engineering. And I think that's a knee-jerk reaction to not enough people really adopting, container environments and doing DevOps and refactoring their applications and making them cloud native.
I mean, I absolutely agree on the refactoring issue. Because we've had various discussions over the course of this series of podcasts around, how do you migrate to, more of a cloud type of application environment. And, it remains a huge issue because obviously if you try and do that and sort of migrate without doing proper refactoring, then containers will run like dogs. It's crazy, but you've got these sort of mad environments where people are saying, oh, well, you can put the VM inside a container. Well, no, don't even think about that. I mean, it's or put a whole monolithic application, wrap it in a container. You think, no, this isn't going to work, guys. But that's a way of them trying to get around this problem that says there isn't the time, focus, or money to properly focus on refactoring applications, and that's a big blocker. And it'll come out later on when we talk about the Deloitte's report. But I wanted to pick up one thing quickly, which again made me smile. There's 2 or 3 things that made me smile as I've looked at these 3 topics that we've done today. Is again from the Datadog report. There was an interesting stat saying 50% of containers use less than 25% of requested CPU. And again, similar figures for memory. And you think one of the biggest challenges, both for virtualization and for containers, are people. In the sense that naturally conservative, this idea, oh, I better over provision because you never quite know what's going to happen. And you sort of go, wasn't cloud supposed to have sort of fixed that issue?
Dynamic provisioning,
dynamic provisioning, but also unlimited provisioning. The ability to burst into the cloud. Oh yeah, we're going to burst into the cloud. Anybody who's sat waiting to try and get a ticket on the Chelsea website when tickets go on sale and is in the virtual waiting room for 40 minutes, will go, what the bloody hell happened to bursting to the cloud? I mean, it's and so I think there are all sorts of issues around corporate culture, risk taking, risk assessment, risk management, and just complexity. If you're going to be tighter on capacity, then your load balancing, capacity management, capacity planning, ability to see forward needs to be far better than it is today. So I think, a lot of the issues that are faced out there are less technical, more cultural and procedural, and ability of companies, organizations, certainly beyond the sort of new digital-only startups, to make the sort of leaps of faith they need to make, and the leaps in terms of amount of money they need to set aside to do these things rapidly. Which is why I think virtualization will be there for some time to come. But I'm not technical. I'd love to have a debate between monolithic and microservices, architecture people going, which one's better and why, so we get a better appreciation of just how far microservices and containerization can go in terms of delivering new applications. At the moment, of course, you can't see a limit. I mean, if you look at new applications, they've got to be container based.
Yeah. So not exactly the end of virtualization, but certainly kind of a decline. I think that
Oh yeah.
that we're seeing. But as with everything, I think we'll continue to be sort of running that, depending on Broadcom's pricing and their model for VMware. For more information on that, as I said earlier, check out our Feb episode of Class State of Play. But yeah, I think we'll it'll be kind of around for a while. But yeah, we are seeing, because of the kind of the shiny new thing of containers and orchestration, observability, and so on. We're kind of seeing
Yeah, and you always sort of one eye on what comes next as well. It's
yeah, it was supposed to be WebAssembly, but we'll see. I'm not seeing that really take off yet.
yeah, I was trying to get my head around that the other day, and yeah, I'm not technical, so I gave up.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think I'll probably end up covering it at some point. But yeah, I think it's not there. But anyway, that's a topic for another day. We can't go into that today. Okay. So let's move on to the second topic, which is the Deloitte Tech Trends Report 2024. So it's broken down into 6 themes, I believe, and the report kind of has an introduction about generative AI being a force multiplier for human ambition. It sounded like a bit of a loaded statement, that one, and I'm kind of getting a little bit not sick yet. It's just not. I'm not going to put it on a rank yet, but these kind of force multipliers and game changers and zero-sum game, terminology is kind of slightly getting, I'm getting a little bit annoyed with that terminology. But anyway, let's dive into the into the report itself. So I think we'll just mention each of the 6 themes of the report as we go through. So the first one says interfaces in new places, spatial computing, and the industrial metaverse. That was quite a mouthful.
Yeah, I was upset, probably the wrong term, slightly aggravated at the use of the term metaverse. I actually think that is a hindrance to the adoption of some of these new technologies in the enterprise and in business in general. I think if you start saying it's the industrial metaverse, the average business person's going to go, looking at the sort of games that are played on Facebook with big headsets and go, this is not for us. And yet the reality, as comes out in this report, which I think is actually quite intriguing, it is quite different, and it's been growing for a while. The use of digital twins, the use of augmented reality. I mean, there are industries that have been using these for some time. The supporting technologies like graph and time series and vector databases, plus the scalability of cloud computing, the cloud itself is all, generating real opportunities, but some very specific use cases. The fact, are most of us going to be using augmented reality and digital twins, in the course of the next, 5 to 10 years? No, but in some very specific areas, heavy engineering, difficult environments, research and development, all those sort of places. Some of the new technologies in terms of digital twin and augmented reality, I think, really do offer game-changing opportunities for organizations out there. I mean, if you're in health, drug research, pharma research, if you have to work in environments that are very dangerous, all these sort of environments, this sort of technology is going to help it enormously.
Yeah, I wish there was like a singular title for all of these things. There's kind of AR and digital twins, IoT space and metaverse and so on. It just seems to be a little bit kind of disparate. I mean, I have seen things like the video games Unreal Engine, for example, being used in films to kind of, plot backgrounds and stuff like that, because it is really that good, in terms of, a kind of realistic feel. And I think that will probably carry on into that kind of video game, technology will carry on into AR as well. So as you said, kind of with, in health systems, and I mean, the report talks about, simulating the whole enterprise, and so on. So there's a whole bunch of stuff about, improved and accessible high fidelity 3D assets and all that sort of thing. And you're right, it's mostly, I think that space is mostly vertical. It's mostly kind of, those kind of environments where and markets where, you're doing stuff on the fly, you're doing stuff in real time, you're doing stuff out in the elements, you're measuring a factory, you're measuring a coal mining site or something like, it's that kind of stuff that you'd use it for. And obviously health, as we said, and so on as well.
So certainly in use of the, in terms of the, if you like, the visual front end, I think it's quite vertical. I think in terms of digital twins, for example, I think they really ought to be much more widely implemented in sort of process industries, even sort of manual processes, but also as a way of sort of delivering best practice automation. I've seen some early examples of people trying to provide that sort of digital twin automation. And I think that's got tremendous possibilities in terms of improvement of processes. But that's not so much the sort of visual front end piece, which is really what they were talking about there in the report, was very much around very different sort of interface to the computer compared to the way we use it today. And obviously Web 3.0 came up, and the ability to use augmented reality in Web 3.0, some way off, but nonetheless, I think these are all interesting for the future. But big question, and I can't remember if it was in this or one of the other sections, it probably crops up in a number of them. The quality of the data you use is going to be critical to this, and therefore one of the things is probably in one of the grounding, one of the ones that's, the supporting enabling technologies. If your data's no good, a lot of the things that Deloitte were talking about won't be optimized. They won't be very good because the quality of the data going in is poor.
Yeah, one last point just before we move on is it's further down that report said 92% of manufacturing executives surveyed said that they're experimenting, with implementing at least one of those sort of metaverse related, use cases. So I guess they're using actually metaverse as that sort of umbrella title, and they expected 12 to 14% improvement in those areas when it comes to sales as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Let's move on just in the interest of time. So the second one in that report says genie out of the bottle, generative AI as a growth catalyst.
This is probably one of the ones that gets you slightly annoyed. Everything's going to be so wonderful with generative AI. I go back to the introduction. There was a lovely piece in the introduction which was talking about generative AI as the force multiplier, with that example of this event that people were at, and somebody was asked said, could the AI system paint a sunset, do a sunset. It did a sunset, and everybody went, okay, yeah, it's a sunset. Yet when a different person came along, and I'm going to read it out, asked to show me a war between pretzels and cheese balls on Mars, where the pretzels have nunchucks and the cheese balls have squirt guns. And apparently the actual canvas or the painting or the picture that was developed by the AI was mad and brilliant, and everybody exploded and sort of, oh, great, that's wonderful. And so I think one of the points that's being made, both in that introduction, but also in this section, is that it's as much about the input from humans as it is about the AI itself. Yes, the AI gets really, really good at spotting and doing things that we find difficult to spot, but it needs to be, given that almost that creative spark to go off and do these things. And I think that's where a lot of the report was heading to, that says, stop worrying about, generative AI taking jobs away and reducing costs. Think much more around how do you upskill, your people, your workforce to think differently, to give AI that extra spark. Otherwise, you're going to get a bit more of the, so what? Yeah, here we go. Yes, losing my job. And I think there's a sort of need for people to to get out of their sort of, oh, AI is gonna hurt us, into how do I make AI work for me?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah, I
is
mean, it's I'm a little bit disappointed with their focus in the report, because it's talking about Gen AI, and kind of, you've got things like, the transformer, sort of technology behind it, and large language models and so on, kind of allow all that to happen, and that's fine. That's kind of the foundational sort of models, but they seem to be focusing a lot more on the almost consumer aspect of it, but yet it's a business, I presume, report, because they're talking a lot about Chat GPT and TikTok and Midjourney and DALL-E and stuff like that, and these are not really, I mean, these are all consumer based stuff that you and I can tap into our web browser and go and play with, but it's not really the business aspect of it. Even there's a chart on there about adoption, and it says, okay, yeah, so ChatGPT took a couple of months to reach 100 million users, whereas TikTok's took 9 months or whatever to reach 100 million users. But I'm not really interested in that. I mean, I'd expect Deloitte to kind of focus more on, okay, so this is how you can, this is how it can be used. Do the Gartner thing of use cases. Yeah, everybody has to list out the use cases. We know the use cases. There still needs to be done, and then move on. How are you going to adopt that? How are enterprises going to make use of it? Where are they now? What do you expect in 24? What do you expect them to be doing in 25? And I don't really see that in the report.
Yeah, I think it's too early. People are not making that leap, are they? I mean, if you look at, we've been talking about the consumerization of IT since probably the early 2000s. And we've seen an awful lot of technologies that businesses have adopted over time, coming out of that, a consumer orientation up front. And I think part of the problem is that, making that leap into how's this going to be used in an enterprise or a business environment hasn't been made. The early adopters, the innovators and the early adopters are still playing around with it. And we haven't got to the phase. I mean, I can remember nearly getting myself fired, I think, at Unisys when we were talking about consumerization of IT, simply on the grounds that most of the people thought, I was absolutely nuts and that it was never going to happen, and it was, so they weren't even getting the mindset. It was just, how would you do this? They were throwing up blocks. And I think we're at that stage with a lot of these technologies, whereas actually what we've seen is that consumer technology overtook and became the lead driver for a lot of enterprise over the course of the last 15 years. AI seems to be in that sort of 2005 stage that consumerization was at, and people are, businesses are looking, saying, I haven't a clue what to do with that. But that uptake of ChatGPT just says that it won't take 15 years, it'll take 5 years to get, because it's so much faster uptake now, so many more people looking at it, it will happen faster, because that sort of evolution into how do I use this for business will move faster than perhaps when that first round of consumerization of IT happened.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, and then the third one is, it says smarter, not harder, beyond brute force compute. So it says businesses are getting more out of their existing infrastructure by adding cutting edge hardware to speed up processes. Soon, some will look beyond the binary computing entirely. I guess that's kind of around quantum computing and stuff like that, in terms of the discussion.
And one that I'd never heard of before, neuromorphic, that completely blew my brain.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
I mean, it does go through. This one goes through things like GPUs and AI chips, and we are seeing those obviously come in first of all, kind of for large models and things like that, large hyperscalers all sort of jumping on the bandwagon. But I know that some of the PC vendors, which we will discuss in the third topic, have also kind of want to integrate stuff into their hardware going forward as well.
Yeah, but the other point that this section was making was that if you go back to the early days of computing, code had to be very effective because the amount of computer resource you had was fairly limited, to put it mildly. And as and actually we've got slightly lazy about the effectiveness of the code that's being written, because the Moore's law kept on doubling the capacity and the capability, and that we're now running into that particular barrier. And therefore you've got to think, and therefore people are starting to look at different ways. You can't just, this is the sort of, you can't just throw more power at it. You've got to be cleverer with it. So we're seeing accelerators, you're seeing offloads again, like old mainframes used to do, into specialist chips, and you're also seeing code that's having to be specifically designed to do certain things. So I think we've moved away from a generalized CPU environment into this, and I think that's going to increase. The original idea of sort of the hyperscalers and cloud computing was rows and rows and rows of pizza boxes, servers. And of course it's changing. You're now getting hyperscalers who are building GPU only data centers. And quantum's going to change things again. So I was intrigued by it, but of course the challenge is that you're going to end up with quite a lot of specialized, differentiated hardware again, which sort of is slightly counterintuitive to the software-defined world we thought we were going to.
Yes, yeah, I do agree with that, and I think that's I mean, for me, that is a concern, to be honest. I wouldn't want to. I certainly wouldn't want to go back to that, but we'll see how that kind of works out, going forward. But yes, I think that sort of diversification is there, and the move away from kind of generic computing, I guess. Okay, so on the fourth one is the DevOps to DevX, so kind of developer experience, empowering the software engineering sort of experience. Now, I think this is, for me, this would automatically translate as being, for things like DevOps kind of progressing to platform engineering, maybe, and that kind of aspect of it. But they're kind of talking a little bit more about retaining the best tech talent and stuff like that in that particular part of the report. So I'm not sure whether it has anything around that or they've picked up on it. I'll be quite surprised. I didn't see anything specific. I don't know if you picked up on that one about the challenge of platform engineering, Paul.
Yeah, I picked up the same thing you did. There was this sort of how do you retain the best and make them make your talent stay where it is because you're giving them a better experience. I don't think they sort of brought it out particularly well. This idea that if you go back to, if you liken it to sort of some of the manufacturing processes where on a production line somebody does the same thing over and over again and actually found that there was better quality and better job satisfaction if they created teams to do work on a broader set of things, and actually they got a higher quality product coming out the back end of it, which was what DevOps was supposed to do in the first place. And we've always said, you know, we've had these discussions that said DevOps didn't really deliver on that promise. And therefore, that's why you've got platform engineering and you've got some other things that are trying to, you know, like make it a much more of a collaborative environment that people work in. And yet every time you see these, and even in this report there, they seem to default to, we've got to keep those creative developers happy at all costs. And you know what happens? The poor old ops people at the far end have to deal with the fallout. You know, I get quite annoyed by that. And so I understood where they were trying to come from, but no, just creating another DevOps, DevX, you know, nomenclature says you're hiding the issue here, guys. It's actually about the, you know, the whole end-to-end process of delivering that is fundamentally flawed, broken. That's probably unfair. It's got a number of joins that aren't properly joined together.
Yeah. I think just in the interest of time, we'll have to move on and leave the fifth and the sixth topics of the report, which is defending reality. I think that's kind of more about AI tools, you know, proliferating, and then kind of impersonations and deceptions being a lot more likely. And then the sixth one was core workout, from technical debt to technical wellness. Businesses that want to lead in the future need to forego piecemeal approaches to technical debt.
It just, you know, and that was one of the ones that gave me a wry smile that said, good luck with that one.
Yeah, I to be honest with you, I would have thought that there's bigger fish to fry, but you know,
well, yeah,
I don't have Deloitte's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's true that, you know, in an ideal world, yes, but the reality is, are anybody going to spend the time and money and effort to do what they've just said?
Well, look at how quickly we forgot about sustainability last year when AI sort of kicked in. I hardly saw any reports about sustainability, not as much as 21, 22, you know, 2021, 2022, you know, prior to that. 2023 was year of AI. Every article was AI. Every headline had the word AI in it. So, and ChatGPT and so on. So I think only now we're kind of going, oh, hang on. We might have to go back to that thing called sustainability. How do you spell that again?
Call it end of the world. Yes.
Yeah. Or sustainability engineering, as I'm calling it. So that's my copyright. I mentioned that to John Hammond, who's from AWS, when I was doing the top 5 tech trends with him, and he said, "Oh, I might steal that," and I thought, "Yeah, please do, popularize it. I don't mind." Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. Okay, so move on to the third one, which is the server vendor and AI dichotomy. Now, I looked up the word dichotomy just in case, just to make sure I was using it properly in this statement. And it says a division or contrast between two things that are or are represented as being opposed or entirely different. And that's how I really feel. I didn't really look, you know, I didn't look up, that was kind of the first dictionary explanation of the word dichotomy, which I thought it kind of really fitted into what I was thinking. So I thought, okay, let's do a little bit of research on this. So I went on HPE's website, and there was a page on sort of AI and stuff like that. And they're discussing everything from they provided a report, and it says that, quote unquote, it says maneuver through the hype and misinformation of today's AI initiatives. Another aspect of the same page said make your data more AI ready. Another part said help speed time to value for your AI workloads and applications. And another one said confidently extend AI across your organization. And the last one said scale your AI models at supercomputing speed. And those were kind of the headlines, and each one was a separate section. They had videos on it and reports and so on. And at the end of each one, it says explore HPE GreenLake solutions. So I'm thinking, oh, so basically the same solutions you've had for the last 10, 15 years. And I looked up Lenovo and I looked up Dell, just to be fair. And they all kind of really seem to, Power Edge and Power whatever, Think Station, they were all, and whatever other server, System X and X Series or whatever they're called these days, they were all pretty much the same thing. So my take on this is that, just like with cloud, the traditional sort of server vendors are yet again scrambling to remain relevant in this AI space. As we all know, AI is not, it's not interested in Intel Xeons and how far the turbo mode can kind of take the gigahertz speed and things like that. They're about accelerators. And yeah, sure, you can put accelerators in notebooks and workstations and servers and so on. But the thing that I always feel, and I've not seen it yet, but I suspect it's coming, is that these kind of enterprise corporate servers are not the type of servers that the hyperscalers want. That's not what they buy. That's again back to the kind of very cheap Chinese or custom made models, and now even more customized because they're going to be running NVIDIA H100s or ARM based Maya chips from Microsoft or something like that.
So I would hesitate to use the word cheap. They're
cheaper.
They're efficient and effective at what they do. Now, because I think if you look at the effort that the hyperscalers and people like Facebook and LinkedIn have put into designing and building their servers, they've spent a lot of time, effort, and money to get the right, construct, if you like, the right architectures and the ability to manage them effectively, which is, they've come at it from a different angle than the traditional, server vendors who, have got a production line shipping tin out, and so therefore they're trying to find new ways of shipping that tin. A lot of the things they were talking about, I like the data one. Yeah, get your data AI ready. I'd love to know if they understand what that actually means. Because yes, you do need to get your data AI ready, but you're going back to basics on some of your data architectures and governance and how the heck do you organize it, all those sort of issues, and how clean and secure is your data so that AI is can make use of it well. But no, for me, I thought, no, you need to take a different view of this. And something that I've seen roughly through my career, which goes back further than I'd like to mention
You care to remember
in IT, can I remember that far back? Is that you get this sort of, it's a bit like a Maslow's triangle hierarchy of needs, one of these glorious sort of triangles. Right at the top are the companies that says, I'll do it myself. In the middle, you get companies who say, help me do it. And at the bottom, you say, do it for me. If you think about it, in the old days, it was probably all about size and scale. The really big, I can remember Midland Bank saying to Burroughs years and years ago when I first joined, you can't tell me anything because I've got far more, technical architects than you have. That was a big bank saying to a vendor, and a mainframe vendor, don't bother telling me what to do. I'll just have the tin, please, because I've got more people. I'll do it myself. You just give me the tin. And therefore, application packages came along that was really a sort of, help me do it. And you've got sort of ISVs and sort of VARs helping people to put it together. And then you've got, just bog standard packages at the bottom end, which was, basically do it for me. And you can look at the world now, and it's not necessarily scale. You look at things like some of the cloud computing technologies. It's not always the biggest companies, it's digital startups. I'll do it myself because it is their business. So I think, if you start to look at it from a sort of business and is it so important to me that I need to do it? Is it quite important that but I'm going to need help doing it, and is it, oh my God, is it just, you're back to the sort of SaaS piece. I'm just going to use as in the AI use case, just use an existing LLM and we'll put an application on top of an existing LLM and run it as a SaaS service. An awful lot of people will take that because it's not differentiated enough. Whatever it's being used for is not so differentiating their particular value proposition. Whereas the people at the top the people at the top, you can imagine people in medical research, in pharmaceuticals, saying, I need to spend the time and effort building my own AI models. I'm that worried about data security and making sure it's all my IP stays where it is, that you can, and the value to them of getting it right, saying that I'll spend the money on doing it myself. So it's those sort of, I think an awful lot of guff is talked by the vendors, because they simply have a piece of hardware to sell. And actually, you need to look at it from a completely different angle. And that may well, so I think to your point, we were talking earlier that, some of these companies that come along and say they've got all these wonderful bits of kit, don't stand a prayer of going up against the hyperscalers at that bottom end of, just you do it, please. There'll be the vast bulk of companies out there will just want a you do it solution, and the hyperscalers will clean up.
Yeah, and I just don't see their relevance, to be honest. I mean, they're kind of, for me, it just seems to be they're getting caught out again, just like the when the sort of the cloud computing movement really started. So sure, they'll kind of follow potentially whatever Intel puts out. It's kind of their standard next generation Xeon AI laden processors or whatever. They'll probably have some kind of AI and then maybe run an ARM chip inside. Who knows what they'll do. But just kind of that'll be just them kind of selling their stuff again. And what they need to do is integrate into what you said, and I'll kind of explain a little bit more about my thinking around that, how enterprises ought to be or will be potentially adopting AI. I'm kind of seeing a little bit of that degree already. It just seems to be, you and I could be reviewing another documentary sponsored by HP, and they might actually even join up together. So a documentary sponsored by HPE, Dell, and Lenovo to say, oh, you don't need AI. What is AI? We don't. It's too expensive, or whatever. Just like the if viewers are familiar with the review that we did on the Clouded documentary, which is on the channel, so I'll include the link of that.
I'm saying nothing because we'll maybe save our gunpowder for the next.
Exactly. We won't say anything, so that one might be coming. And there's a second.
There's a sequel, isn't there?
There's a sequel to the Clouded one as well, which we will be definitely reviewing. Okay. So just looking at kind of, so how are kind of enterprise going to implement it? I did actually an article on this on the T-Systems website, LinkedIn, somewhere, which again, I'll include the link in the description, which was kind of loosely based on what I'm seeing in terms of trends and people are talking about, when it comes to how enterprises are actually going to not adopt and strategize and test and play with, but actually implement AI. How they're going to implement and not use. We know how they're going to use it. They're going to put it into, whatever data sets, and not that, but actually implement it. How they're going to implement it. And just for the sake of, sort of simplification and clarity, I equated it to, things like infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. So I kind of called it, AI infrastructure as a service. So that's kind of where, with that, you're essentially building your own model from scratch, hardware, software, model, data set, foundation model, etc., training, fine tuning, RAG, all that stuff. It's an agents potentially. You're doing it all yourself. Second one is AI PaaS, so where you actually take a pre-existing model and fine tune it. So whether you use some of the fine-tuning techniques or RAG or whatever the approaches that you do, and some people are looking at that as an option for how enterprises would adopt sort of AI in their business. And then the third one is where you essentially go to a pre-trained, pre-fine-tuned potentially model where you do maybe a little bit of RAG or something like that, where it's basically AI SaaS. So you kind of really, it's a software as a service. All you got to do is bring your data sets, right? And somebody else has built it, pre-trained it in your markets. If you're in kind of law or health or legal or whatever it is that you're in, there's actually a kind of a model there already, and you've just got to bring your data sets to that and start making use of it within your your data sovereign, and it's all segregated and whatever, and you just got to bring that data and then start making use of it. So that's kind of was the predictions that I put out in the article that I wrote around AI, where I said, either you're going to build it yourself. Not many people are going to do that. Those with deep pockets can, maybe in the finance sector and so on. AI PaaS, where you kind of take a foundation model and fine tune the model, or just AI SaaS, which is probably the majority of organizations. This year, I think I've seen, and I've again surveyed a lot of some exec dinners that I've been on. I've asked people saying, what are you guys doing this year? And actually asked two personal friends of mine who work for a couple of large corporations in the UK. And I said, what are you guys doing? Are you guys, testing AI and an AI model and stuff? Yeah, we are doing that. Okay. So you kind of, piloting that for this year? Yes, we are. Okay. Do you have a strategy for AI? Yes, we do. Do you have have you kind of put out the basics of, you can't just drag and drop, a full PowerPoint presentation, which has NDA slides in it in Copilot or ChatGPT. Have you got that kind of policy for your employees? Yes, we do. Okay. And do you kind of expect to see any sort of implementation in 2025, 2026? Yeah, 2026. Our pilots and whatever will probably stretch into, we'll go 18 months. So they'll probably stretch into next year. So that's kind of, makes sense. And obviously, as I said, depending on the size of the budget that the organization has, they'll probably adopt one of those three approaches or thereabouts. Now, these are not industry standard approaches. It's just kind of my best educated guess at kind of saying, okay, practically, what does this look like? Day one, when we start looking at this as an enterprise, what does this look like? And that's kind of my sort of guess of that.
I think that's very sensible. Funny enough, just looking at that triangle I've drawn, it drops
very close, yeah,
very close into that. Yeah. The infrastructure as a service one at the top, and at the point of it at the top, and the PaaS is very much the help me do it one in the middle, and SaaS is the you do it for me at the bottom. So I think it actually works, and I think that's right. I mean, the only difference you might have at the top would be whether people use an infrastructure as a service approach or actually have their own equipment.
Yeah, so this is where I was saying about the vendors, knowing the market, not just saying, oh yeah, it's all about this and AI and no, go and focus on those customers in those three categories that do want to do it themselves. And that's where you'll be able to sell your platforms, your hardware, software, servers, switches, whatever it is that you're selling today. You'll be able to sell that more effectively to those customers and actually make a decent profit from that, versus just saying, hey, our systems can do AI, come and buy from us. It's like, well, no, we're not going to do that, because we're a small company, we're SaaS, we're just going to take our data sets to Salesforce or whoever, and we'll drop it into Salesforce Einstein or whatever it is, and and we'll just make use of their expertise, their platforms, their solutions, their SaaS solutions, versus having to build our own from scratch. It's not the same as when everybody was in the data center. They said, okay, we need an Exchange server. Okay, so we need to go and buy a Dell server for that, or a IBM server, or Lenovo server, whatever. Or we need a database server, an Oracle server. So we need to go and buy a whole bunch of servers to put install Oracle database on it. It's not the same. And that mentality, I think these vendors, which is my main complaint really, on this particular topic, that mentality needs to change. It cannot be that you just kind of jump on the bandwagon and say, please buy it from us. And by the way, it's the same hardware that we've been selling for the last 10 years. Nothing's changed.
No, I agree. My goodness me, we agree right at the end there.
Hey.
Hey.
And before you change your mind, let's end it there. Okay, all right. So I think we've reached the end. Definitely, we're kind of top of the hour. So again, thank you, Paul, for all your comments. I really always appreciate your contribution to these episodes. And yeah, it's great that we kind of can bounce these ideas all the time and have a good conversation. If you have any topics that you'd like us to talk about, dear viewers, please, or dear audience, I should say, please let us know. Drop us a comment in the comment section of the video. Drop me an email. I think my email should be on my website. Don't abuse that, please. Yeah, please let us know. And if you have any other comments you'd like to make about the topics we've discussed today or previous episodes, please do so. Again, do go back to the episodes. I think I'll have a playlist of all the episodes somewhere. So if you kind of want to binge watch some of the previous Class State to Play episodes, by all means do that. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.